committee around. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Tino Turakatani.
Nā koe e te kai whakamana, tēnā koro e ngā minita, ngā mema o te whare, tēnā koutou. Ngā uri o tāwhao, ko Raukawa, ko Rere Ahu, ko Maniapoto, me ngā uri o Tia, te tupuna o tūwhare toa, ko hara mai nei, I roto I tēnei whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to rise and speak at this second reading of these two bills, the settlement bills for Maraeroa A, B blocks, claim settlement, and Maraeroa A and B blocks incorporation bill. And like the chair of our select committee and my whanaunga tau henare, I don't care to traverse all of the details and all the different aspects of the history and the elements to the bill and the settlement, Mr. Speaker. So I'll keep my remarks quite general. I think they've been adequately covered by my colleagues thus far. So my comments, Mr. Speaker, are really just in relation to what my colleague Mr. Clendon touched on, the notions of ownership and other general matters in terms of the history, the connection of our people to our whenua, and the movement of our people and how those movements and the connections that were made around the motu have brought us to this situation which we are now dealing with with Maraeroa A and B, Mr. Speaker. So as a first-time member of this House, I'm humbly reminded of the real reason why our people elected representatives, their Māori representatives into this House, here in the Whare Pāremata. And the Māori MPs have traditionally, we've been elected and still are, to really represent the many take that have been put forward by aggrieved relatives. And that's the case right across the motu. So I acknowledge the mana of the ancestors of the hapu represented here today, who I mentioned in my mihi at the start. You know, because it's easy to forget that Tūwhare Toa and Raukawa and Maniapoto and Rere Ahu, they were actual people who had wives, children, and the following. And they practiced their own forms of tino rangatiratanga and mana motuhake on their whenua. So it's easy to refer to, we refer to ourselves by the name of our tupuna, like, he's a Tūwhare Toa, or she's from Raukawa. So I'd like to acknowledge those tupuna who've gone before, those eponymous ancestors who were just ordinary men, ordinary folk, trying to make the best decisions for themselves and for their kin. And thank goodness for whakapapa, because if it weren't for the work of our oral historians and the early Māori informants and transcribers, much more of Aotearoa would have been alienated by today. So, Mr. Speaker, much of today's cultural redress, and this is where I'm getting into the elements of this bill, is due to the Pākehā systems of ownership, fee simple titles, straight lines on maps. You know, those things are an anathema to Māori, but you know, that's the system of land tenure that we have today, and they were definitely foreign way back in the 1860s. You know, to Māori, the notions of ownership was the old system of micromanagement of the estate, a pre-arranged war, a pre-arranged marriage, and the inevitable pre-arranged hakari at the end of it. So those concepts sit much better in the Māori mind. And, you know, the war isn't over until both sides say so. And so that suggests constant dialogue, and that's much more important to Māori than what the Pākehā system of land tenure has done for the history of this country. And so for 150 years, the descendants of Maraeroa A and B were excluded from their ancient rights of practices on their whenua because the Lands and Survey Department took a wrong creek, made a wrong mark, went down the wrong ridge. And so those arbitrary actions, or those careless,
On purpose?
well, purposely careless actions on a piece of paper those moments of carelessness started a 150-year mamai and resentment and grievance. And so it's really humbling for me to be able to stand as a Māori member of this House to be able to rectify some of these, or put some measure of rectification through the enactment of these bills and these settlements, Mr. Speaker. Another aspect of being Māori, Mr. Speaker, is whakapapa. And I always like to, if I'm speaking about something, try and draw on a connection of, you know, something that I can relate to. And I'm very proud of the Ngāti Rārua, Ngāti Tama connection that I have through the Pautini Ngaitahu side down in there on the west coast. So while there was all the intra-tribal hapu fighting that was going on up there between Rereahu, Raukura, Toa, Rangatira, Ngāti Rārua and Ngāti Tama, they sort of ventured down to Upoko te Ika, and then they hopped over and went down into Waiponamu. And again, it's an example of the movement of people and the conflicts, but also the marriages and the peace and the kaitaka wainga that resulted from a lot of that. And so I'm proud to make that connection to my smidgen of Rārua and Tama whakapapa, which goes all the way back up to whanaunga of Rereahu, Raukawa and Maniapoto, who are all the descendants. We all go back to Tainui Waka. So it's just great to be able to sort of claim some connection there to these people and this bill and this rectification of their settlement through this bill. And I also want to just make a final remark, Mr. Speaker. We talk about a lot of the elements to these settlements of giving or gifting back or giving back lands that were taken in certain covenants. And I just want to make sure that Māori are able to exercise full mana motuhake over their lands that are returned to them, if that is their wish. And I know there's a lot of covenants and restrictions that are these days, but I look back to what, I'm a South Island landless native, and we were landless in the south, and we were given these wastelands way down at the bottom of nowhere where no one ever ventured as a compensation for an economic base. And so, yes, I'm a present-day descendant, much like the descendants of Maraeroa A and B, of those lands. But in practical terms, we can't do anything with those lands because there's restrictions that are placed all over them. And so that's one area that I hope to rectify during my tenure in this august House. So, Mr. Speaker, that's really all I'd like to say. Just keep the remarks general, but I mihi to the whānau of Maraeroa A and B. I commend them to Mana o Rereahu Trust for all the work that they've put in to advancing this settlement. And at the end of the day, the descendants of these four iwi can finally lay to rest the grievance of their grandparents. So I mihi to them all, and I commend this bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker.
Louise Upston.
Tēnā koe.